As women of the middling sort began to move into wage labor, to think in terms of a new independence, and to claim a new right to sexuality, they challenged the ideal of the obedient wife responsible for a moral home. The result was a subtle bargain. Men and women continued to support the idea of the traditional home, and both tacitly agreed to restrict the kinds of jobs women could take. One way or another, many women claimed their jobs to be extensions of home roles, or to enhance the qualities required of the good homemaker. So, for example, protective labor legislation sent the message that women may be allowed to work for wages as long as their roles as future mothers were not damaged by wage work. The jobs into which women were channeled tended to be sex-segregated, supervised by men, and lacking in authority. Women worked in arenas where obedience was valued, where neatness and modesty were valuable commodities, and where their work seemed to reflect family values of care and nurturance. Jobs like teaching, for example. And they worked for wages that averaged from 1/3 to 1/2 of what a comparable male would receive in a comparable job. By channeling men and women into different jobs, by segregating them occupationally, manufacturers, employers, and even women themselves managed to convince each other that though women were out in the wage work world, they were still committed to the home. The system of scientific management elegantly reflects how the rules were applied. As it was applied in the 1920s on the factory floor, scientific management proposed a strict division of supervisory work and manual labor. Managers were expected to decide what was to be done, what motions were best suited to the most efficient outcomes, which workers were best suited to the task at hand, and how quickly the work could proceed. Their judgment of product and speed determined the wage to be offered. But while workers could be either male or female, managers were invariably male. Female workers had no voice in either the process or speed of work, in the minutes or hours of work before a break, in the position of arms and elbows. Women were, as they were expected to be at home, obedient to the commands of men. The transformation of office work provides a second example. By the 1920s, office work occupied almost a quarter of the female wage-earning labor force. Economist Marjorie Davis tells us how these women became subject to scientific management techniques that defined how they would move and act in order to complete each task as efficiently as possible. Additionally, employers advertised for women who were neat, deft, accurate, and had quick fingers. Once in the office, supervisors measured the number of keystrokes typed, the number of minutes required to add up a column of figures, the time required to turn over each page of a letter. Absent a demand for initiative, women could do any job within the requisite time schedule, enabling a job that might once have required thought to move from male to female hands. At the secretarial level, bosses wanted women who would be on time and agreeable to caring for a male boss by making coffee, picking up dry cleaning, and buying Christmas presents for the wife and children. Should that caring role lead to sexual entanglement, the secretary would, of course, be the one to go. Still, the risk might be worth it. The secretary who cared for a single male at work garnered greater prestige and pay than the one who worked from a typing pool. The flip side of scientific management was increased productivity that would enable higher consumption. Men would trade obedience for a family wage. Henry Ford's $5 a day wage is the first and most important example. $5 a day, which he offered right after World War I, would enable a fairly comfortable life for a man and his family, and it was offered to male workers who lived exemplary family lives. Women, no matter how good they were, or what jobs they did, or how many family members they supported, could not earn $5 a day at Ford. Of course, the assumption was that every man needed to provide for a family, while women were simply supplementing the income of a male provider. In the totality, the well-being of the worker now gets measured in terms of consumption. Consumption is fostered and sustained by a male family wage. It can become larger because scientific management produces greater profits, and it could be supplemented, perhaps, and if necessary, and only sporadically, by a female wage. In these ways, jobs and wages conveyed to women the information that their wage work was less important than that of men. They managed to go to work, to be sure, in far larger numbers than they ever had before. In 1920, we count about 8 million women in the wage labor force. By 1930, about 10 million, an increase from about 22% of women in the wage labor force to almost 30%. But still, the question remains, does the kind of freedom that these jobs gave women add up to equality? Or are the freedoms of women so constrained that they remain firmly subordinate to men? Those are the questions that we'll explore in the 1930s when we move into the Great Depression. We'll see that women discover once again just how tightly the family binds them.